we had this data stream that says that around 9:22, around the 22nd of September, we would reach a point where from there until the 27th, we would have an emotional plateau of some high level of what we call building emotional tension. And building emotional tension is the state we're in right now, and everybody who's worried about the market knows exactly what that feels like and what it does to their digestion, their sleep, etc., hair falling out, so on. So it's probably pretty self-evident. And we then had data that suggested that there might be a little tiny dip from 9/27 until October 7th in terms of the amount of that building tension, but it's basically still on that same plateau. And then on October 7th, and I chose, universe moved me to choose it. I chose 10 minutes after 7 in the morning, UTC time, which makes it 10 after midnight my time here on the Pacific Coast. On October 7th would be the point at which we would slip into what I call release language. The release language is where everybody is letting out the emotion as opposed to letting the emotion in and affecting their body. They just can't take it anymore, and they're expressing that emotion. Good, bad, or indifferent, they're expressing it. So release has to do with expression. Building has to do with input. And we're going to get into a period that goes from October 7th until now the new data run is showing that it's moved into about mid-March of 2009. Pretty straightforward release language that entire period with no little stair steps, if you will, in the building tension language. And it needs to be said that mostly life is up and down, up and down, up and down, good days, bad days kind of thing on a giant collective. We rarely, and in fact have never, since 1997, seen anything in the model space that looks like what's going to happen in October, from October through the first part of March.
And to make people aware of what you saw during 9/11, you didn't see such a long release period, if I remember correctly.
That's quite correct. There was about 6 days at a fairly precipitous release following 9/11, and then there were 3 or 4 days at a less steep release, and then basically on the 11th day following 9/11, we were back into that stair-step building period. We'd already, if you will, absorbed the emotional impact of the event, and we're starting to respond and build emotional patterns to cope with it all. So if we look at the two as in a comparison, not the level, not the intensity of the emotion, but the duration of the emotion is many, 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 many times longer than what was felt after 9/11. But that isn't to say that it's going to be emotionally as intense that way continuously. That rarely would happen, I would think. Could, but it just doesn't seem to be too likely.
Okay, but what about the actual event itself? In other words, was the 9/11, spike, if you will, matching the spike that you're getting on October 7th, or is it much higher for October 7th?
No, it doesn't work that way, okay, because our data can't be compared exactly from 2001 to now, because in the nature of our programming, we've refined our technique over time. So we have to state that right out, that we're kind of in a sense of like a doctor that discovers a new disease and then over the course of time gets really, really, really good at diagnosing that disease, and it spreads out. Everybody gets really good at diagnosing the disease, and all of a sudden you see statistics showing that this disease is everywhere. And it's just simply because we've been able to look at it, the sensitization to the process. So we can't make a direct comparison that way. Nor can we say that there's going to be a particular event at 7:10 in the morning UTC. That's what I'm saying, that my model space, the best granularity I've got, shows the whole planet starting to shift over into release language. There may indeed be an event, and I'm kind of expecting something, but it need not be either visible on the global media stream, nor particularly intense at that stage to start this process off, because we're at such a huge level of building tension. The event could be as innocuous as someone showing up at the LIBOR bank early in the morning and to go to work, and the door being locked and the key broken off in the door such that it takes an additional 4 hours to get in, and LIBOR doesn't open when it should, and a fiscal tremor goes around the world that crashes the whole financial system. See?
So it could be a rather small actual event, is what you're saying, but what it portends or what it results in is a very long duration.
Protracted, correct. because that door was not locked, for want of a nail, the horse was lost.
Okay, well, I mean, I know that you said that if I remember correctly, like on rents, you talked about there were actually proportions within the actual event that were military a certain amount, economic a certain amount. Can you explain that?
Correct. And see, but that's not within the event. That's within the state of the model space at the time that the event occurs. Bear in mind, see, we don't do prophecy. We construct a highly quirky and weird little interface into time in a model space in a computer, and then advance it tick by tick by tick and watch as it makes changes. And then on top of that, we have to look for something significant. So what we're seeing is at the point at which this trigger event or precipitating event, however we think about it, occurs, the emotional tension balance is about 48% economic, shading up to about 51% at the moment, but that may back down by the time we get to October 7th. And then about 40 to 45% military, and then the rest is what we call terra intrusions, which is really earth changes kind of thing, hurricanes, that sort of deal.
But when you say it could be a small thing that lasts 5 months in duration, it could be triggered by a tiny thing, even innocuous. It could be something. I mean, I'm asking you whether whether a virus, for example, could be a release of a virus that at first is actually not even noticeable.
I suspect that won't be the case in October. If that's the case, the virus has already been released, because what's going to happen is that the language shifts at that point. So somebody starts talking about something at that point. Now, whether it's a whole lot of people talking about it, make sense?
Okay, but there's also, I mean, it looks, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like you track what looks like trends in language.
Correct.
Because I'm noticing that some of your keywords are things like revolution, transformation, duality.
Okay, those are metadata layers. Those are not keywords. What happens is that we build our model space. It gets all sliced up into all these various different entities. And then over time, we allow the universe to give us words to populate them. And it turns out that over time, whole lots of words that all fall under the context of revolution showed up in the markets entity, and showed up in our representation for the populace of the U.S., and showed up in global populace representation, and so on. So these are not keywords. We don't go hunting for those. Those are derived contexts. And those are showing up serendipitously. Rather, the data is coming back that nicely and neatly sorts in all of our entities into those categories that are headed by those words, and I sure hope that was understandable.
Yeah, it's kind of like packets.
Exactly.
Okay, so, but I'm also interested in the way you're looking at your data such that you're interpreting your data. Do you find that looking at it changes it?
No, Heisenberg, no, I don't believe so. I don't believe that if you're talking about the Heisenberg principle of uncertainty kind of thing in the immediacy, no, I don't believe that that's the case. Undoubtedly, at a quanta level, there's some of that going on. Now, if you're asking, because can we see this, will the universe change, we don't know about that.
Okay, what about the idea that somehow I stumbled on your information quite some time ago, although I didn't remember it as being associated with your website. Then when you re-emerged and you started to be, sort of have more of a media profile, if you will, which seems to be even lately.
Right, let me tell you why that is.
Okay.
All right, let's divert here for a second. Our model is built in this software called IntelliCAD. IntelliCAD is an artificial model space, if you will, for drawing virtually any kind of an object in a CAD sense, computer-aided design. It turned out to be very handy for us because we expanded at will. Part of our problem is that if we have people read our reports and then cut and paste the text out there, when our spiders read their own words, it has a tendency to be self-reinforcing, and we spiral down and everything goes to hell in a handbasket real quick. So we have to be very careful about who reads our reports so that we don't get them out there cutting and pasting this stuff wildfire, because we end up spiraling down and can't do anything. In order to help prevent this, I developed this software in late 2001. I started working on it. It went through 2003, and I finally got it working, and we call it MOM, and it's the model of model space. And basically, it's a representation of our work within the model space, separate from the model itself. a rather abstract kind of screwy idea, but it works very well. Within there, we model ourselves, for instance. And along about, let's say, December of 2006, basically Mom started being able to put out some forecasts for us. Now, this means I got to divert for a second and say that my particular approach to reading these forecasts is based on sort of a non-Western style of thought, and so I started taking them seriously, and I thought to myself, wonder what would happen if I started harmonizing with what Mom says might be in my future. And that's where we are now, because Mom suggested that it was a good time to get on out and capture October 7th. So I said, okay, Mom, I'll do it.
So in a sense, you're running an experiment within
a radical linguistics experiment, correct.
Okay.
Can the future be altered?
By going out there, that's actually gets back